All right, guys. This is gonna be our first backend videos. The backend videos are finally here. And the goal is just to take you guys through the whole process of setting up the backend. Just try my best to explain my thought process and just go into things in the correct amount of detail that you guys would need to learn the core foundations and fundamentals that you would need to be able to, build screens with good state management and data management and providers going forward. I'm going to try my best to keep these videos condensed to 15 minutes long. So I don't know how long the series will be, but it will just be I'll try my best to make it 15-minute videos that just go through everything we need to go through. So the first thing for you guys to know is that when you first get a screen, or let's start rather by saying the first video you guys should watch, I would say, is the routing video. From the front end series, the only video you need to watch is the app routing and navigation video, because that's going to get us started from this point where we're at right now. This video is important because it will show you how screens are routed and how the front end people routed the screens, right? So typically once a front end person hands off a screen to you for this sprint, what you'll see is a button over here that will have the specific name of the screen that you're working on. So either confirm profile, edit photo, or opening screen. When you click on that screen, it will just take you to the screen, which looks like this. You have to invite friends up there. This is the screen that I was given. This screen is going to be stateless. So when I click this button, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen when I get click started. It's all stateless, and their code is going to be in presentation. So if we go to the folders over here, the code I'm going to write is going to be in reference. So you guys will just go to reference, invite friends. And as you can see, I set up the same architecture, clean architecture, data, domain, presentation, providers. These folders have nothing inside of them. Presentation is what the front end will have for you. And in that presentation layer, you'll see the front end people's code, right? And pretty much this is the front end person's code that they wrote. It will be a stateless widget to start out with. And this is all just their design stuff that they made for us to be able to have the screen to look like this, right? Another big thing is before you guys even start is you have to go to the Figma right here and just kind of get a feel of what the screen is doing. Typically, when we start building out more screens and we start working on edge cases, playing field is going to be these edge cases for like what should happen when the button is clicked, when something happens. So typically Ethan's really good about setting up the edge cases. So that's what we'll typically be working on, just making sure these are wired correctly to have these specific outputs when something is pressed or, something of that nature. But the screen I'm working on today that I'm going to be setting the backend for is the invite friends page, right? So that's the screen right here. So just make sure to read a little bit about the screen, selecting invite, what it should do. Will bring up nav bottom sheet bar used, send link to the game. So that's just some context of what it would be used for, right? But for the context of this video, it's just, to get a feel of how to set up the backend architecture for it. So please, step one is to read the content and interaction and then look at the screen in the Figma. Once you're done doing that part, you'll then go to the code, run the front end code that they gave you. And all I did by doing that is I just went to main. And if you go to main, you just run without debugging. That's it. Once you run that without debugging, you head over to the screen and this is what you'll see. So just a little introduction. So let's say now you see your screen that the front end person has made for you. How do you go about this, right? So I have some notes here that I'm going to be going through with you guys. And I actually made something really nice for you guys. It's called the lesson plan, which I put in the documentation, which will have kind of all the talking points I'm going through, just to remind you on the thought process of how to do things. But step one is to just think about the screen and ask yourself two questions. What can change on the screen? What can the user do on the screen? Okay, so let's talk about the first question. What can change on the screen? right? The things that change become the state fields. And that's what we're going to be working on first. Okay. So let's think about it. What do we think can change on the screen, right? Um, the send invite button can show a disabled when sending. So we could make the send invite button disabled. When, how do I explain this? So when someone clicks this send invite button, right? We don't want, once they click it, they shouldn't be able to click it again until the task is done, for example. So that's something that could change the state of this button. It will go from enabled to disabled so that people don't spam it thinking that it didn't work. So it needs to be responsive. That's how I'm kind of thinking about it. So we can make that change. Some things I thought about is the invite can be successfully sent. That's something that can change, right? On the screen, something can go wrong, something can go right. Those are some things that can change. And I'm thinking about is loading. When you click that button and we're doing that data call, what happens during that data call, right? Where do we store that time, that asynchronous method is going on? In that space of time, we can have a variable that is loading, right? We can make it a boolean. If it's loading, it's true. If it's not loading, it's false. So then we can do specific things based off of that boolean. While is loading is true, what should happen? Maybe a sprinter happens so the user can understand that it's loading. Invite is sent, right? That could be true or false. If the invite is not successfully sent, we want to know. So that could be another boolean. Error message, we could have a string for that. Success message as well, right? Those are things that can change on the screen that I'm thinking about when I'm making the screen. And that's kind of how you guys should think about things as well. And then what can the user do? So when you look at this, what can the user do? It looks like user has two actions they can do. Second question, they can send an invite or they can get started. So we need to think about what the user can do as methods. And these methods are what happens when the user clicks something. So send invite should be a method because there's some functionality we need to write for when that button is clicked, right? So tap send invite, then an asynchronous action happens, right? We go to the database, we check, and then we send the email. And then once the email is sent, we show success or error. So that's a method right there that we need to write. Get started is also another method. What is the get started method? When you click on it, this one is synchronous because you need to have it instantly move to the next screen. There's nothing we're waiting for, nothing we have to check. So those are just some small things we have to think about, when making the screen. And then pretty much these are the initial foundations of that contract we talked about, where we're thinking about the data fields that we could potentially use. It's important for the front end to know this contract because we do import those data fields into the front end screens when we make them consumer widgets. So there's some small things to think about before we even start coding. I think this first video will just be overview and introductions of what we're going to be doing. But the second thing is clean architecture, right? So making sure that every time we create a feature, we have a data, domain, presentation, right? We'll have a domain presentation where the front end stays, and then we'll have providers. So this is where we're going to be writing our code in. This is the architecture we always follow when we're working on a module or a set of screens. We always want to make sure for that specific section of things, we have data, domain, presentation, and providers, just so we always stay consistent. And then just, a reminder, this is feature first. So we try to contain our folders by feature. So just using the feature first approach when we set up the backend. And then, let's talk about some important things, especially when it comes to domain. Domain is pretty much just a pure class. So no Firebase in the domain, no river pod, no dependencies. This is the data fields, right? Domain holds all the data. The screens need to be immutable objects, okay? Meaning that it can be updated. So it's like, I like to explain it as like a switch, right? It's just a switch, and the provider can either switch that switch on or off, but the switch stays the same. The data field stays the same. It's loading. It's either on or it's either off. Another analogy is like it doesn't know anything. It doesn't know methods. It doesn't know anything. All it knows is like it's like a scoreboard. The scoreboard doesn't know which team scored or how the goal happened. All the scoreboard knows is to update one or it's zero. So it's pretty much that way what we would put in the domain. We're just setting up the data fields. That's how I would describe them, right? Then the data layer is just a repository. So we'll have our abstract class in there, and then we'll start off with mock implementation of just data that we would need, Firebase. So that's where we keep that stuff, the connection, the data that we would need to use for the screens is stored in there. Then we have our provider, which is the brain that connects all of this together, which will go in the providers folder. The provider has the state notifier, which manages states and exposes them to methods when the screens are looking for data. The notifiers help us to expose that data that we have in those data fields. It's also registers everything with Riverpod. So providers, that's where Riverpod is big. Riverpod handles all that state management for us and is the bridge between the data layer and the UI. Okay, that's what Riverpod is. Joshua said it perfectly. It's like the glue of everything. That's what brings it all together. The methods are written in Riverpod and the providers. Okay, so very important. That's what we're going to be writing as well. Then presentation. Let's go into that file quickly for invite friends. As you can see now, it starts off as a stateless widget because that's what the front end people make. So they give us a stateless widget that does nothing, and then we'll come in and turn it into a consumer stateful page, which watches the provider and the methods that we wrote, just so that we can call those methods on the screens. Otherwise, there's no way for us to keep the data persistent for our screens. So that's what Riverpod really does for us. It helps us to keep data persistent across screens. So that, that same email you sent in the beginning, is still available to use if you need it at a later stage. That's what providers do. If we didn't have providers, it would be stuck in that screen. It would be local to that screen that you have made it for. It wouldn't be able to carry on in different screens. So that's kind of a little introduction into what we're going to be working on. I try my best to just, give a quick overview of what to expect in the upcoming videos. But yeah, from the next video, we're going to start coding. We're going to start with the domain. So since this video is at 13 minutes, I think we'll pause it right here, and then we will go ahead and start this implementation of the screen.